Hi, everybody. We're the Skeleton Crew. It's May. It's May 9th, 2024. We have just recorded the Atrociraptor video. We are doing the March Q&A.
We're good at this.
We are so schedule conscious.
Hey, everybody. Have a happy May thy 9th chip and shatter.
Yeah, that's good.
It's still from Twitter.
I like that. We're going to get right into it. But before we do, a reminder, if you support us on Patreon at our Basilosaurus tier or higher, that's $15 a month or more pledged, you get to ask us monthly Q&A questions. And at some month in the future after you ask them, we'll answer them.
In our defense, this was right before April, in which we had a hell of a time. Yeah. Both literally and like in the good way and in the bad way.
Yes. Yeah, no, things have been incredibly busy. We're all finishing a bunch of papers. You guys didn't know this at the time, but obviously I was in the process of negotiating for a job. It's all complicated.
There's a lot of excuse.
Scott didn't do anything, and he should have answered all the questions on his own.
Only some of them were directed at me specifically.
So anyway, we have questions. We're going to give you answers. And we should start now. Dalton, do you want to be the question meister?
I can certainly be the meister. Okay. The meister of ceremonies. The first question comes to us from Nickname. What is the problem child in your field of research and why? And for Scott, what is the worst fossil preparation you have seen? I'll kick it off just because we're going to go in the order in which people have typed their responses to our document. For me, there are many problem children when it comes to researching squamate evolution. But frankly, the two ones there, I'll give two answers, and they're ones that I'm thinking of right now for projects that I'm working on. They're both extant things. They're both alive today, but they're still problem children. And the first are the Dibamids, which what's their friggin' common name?
I was about to say I don't know anything.
Blind skinks, although they're not skinks.
Are they blind?
I think they are blind. Oh, okay. They are blind. They're burrowing. They look like worms. They're these little limbless lizards that, frankly, their anatomy is so strange that it's so hard. And there's no good fossil record of figuring out where they go on the tree. And molecular analyses put them as either like the sister to geckos, maybe, or the very base of the tree. Like the very first group of squamates is this like stupid little worm. And frankly, I could be convinced they go anywhere. They're bad. The other problem child is another worm, which is Anniella, which is the California legless lizard, which is certainly an anguid of some kind, but it is also a persistent troublemaker when it comes to phylogenies. Those are my problem children. Scott, you're up next.
I am, but I can forfeit till the end so I can keep a lot of this, so we can keep things thematic if we want.
Amelia, then.
Right. Keeping to the lizards. For Mosasaurs specifically, Halisaurs tend to drive me nuts because I don't understand them, and my Mosasaur committee member and I are of different minds of where they should go. Because they have really weird anatomy. Like they've got a combination of characters that make them look simultaneously like really derived or like more like other mosasaurs, and then some other goofy characters that make them look like not. They're dumb and they're annoying, but they're kind of cool. And zooming out a little bit, the broader problem within lizards that is relevant to me is snakes. There's a lot of work going on, like within snakes. Like I think those people are having a great time, the snake researchers. But as soon as you try to put snakes amongst the fossils, everything gets bad because there's not a lot of fossil snakes. And you might not know this, but there's a hypothesis that might be related to mosasaurs, which is it's tricky. And I think I've talked about this many times before. Basically, because again, it's hard to tell with this anatomy. It's so messed up whether they have these things in common because they're actually related or because they're doing something similarly ecologically. So. Yeah.
I haven't written an answer yet, but my answer is brief, so I'll swoop in here. I work on Tyrannosaurs. You know what the problem child is.
Or say
The
less.
problem child are the children, which is ontogeny is a hard thing to account for. Luckily, I have solved it, and it's over. But in a very real sense, it's an issue that you have to contend with a lot, especially when you have a group of organisms that is mostly like kind of defined by an increase in body size from the ancestral size. That's quite dramatic. It does remain a quantity that you have to contend with. And so there's a number of historic cases of ontogeny being very difficult to account for in Tyrannosaur systematics. And it is currently the new circle of hell that I've discovered. Dante didn't know about this one when he wrote the Divine Comedy, but I'm going to go back in time and tell him so that he can add it to his circles of hell.
Yeah, many such cases.
Many such cases.
I guess it's my turn. The problem child. I am the problem. No. In croc world, it's definitely Philatasuchians. Those are marine crocs, and whether they are very early diverging or more closely related to later groups of crocodilians is contentious and not particularly well resolved. It is unlike some, I will say it is unlike some dinosaur zones in that most people don't have a really strong opinion on where it goes. They're like, yeah, it can go, I don't know, maybe. In my foray into dinosaur world, there are a lot of problematic little dudes. Some early diverging small coelurosaurs are a little contentious. Wink. I did the Lucille Bluth wink where I winked with the wrong eye. And in my palette stuff, really anything that doesn't have groups that don't have ectopterygoids, so turtles, ichthyosaurs, and captorinids are all problematic to me. But I love them equally. But yeah, those are the things that when I have despair pop into my mind.
Okay. Well, these are all the problem children. And Scott, what is the worst fossil preparation you have seen?
So to go on Alex's point there of when I have moments of despair, these things pop into my mind. I've seen a lot of real bad fossil prep in my day. I've joked before that a good chunk of being a fossil preparator is cursing the names of the people who came before you. But like I've dealt with a lot of really hard things to work on. Like picking out epoxies and like animal glues and stuff like that are just an absolute pain in the ass to deal with, and they're so time consuming and they like damage the fossil when you take them off a lot of the time and stuff. I would say though that the worst fossil prep that I've ever seen are things that can't be fixed. Like there's a difference between things that are a pain in the ass to work around and fix and things that it's just gone. There were a lot. I've seen a whole lot of early fossil prep, or not even that early, just from a while ago, fossil prep of specimens where the goal was aesthetics more than research, and things were ground down to make it look pretty, or things were like covered up to make it look pretty. Very frequently, this was like condyles on long bones and stuff like that. Like it was just like, just guess to what it looks like. Grind the bone to make it fit what you think it is. And it's like,
that's so cool.
No, or also just the stories of people prepping through soft tissue preservation to get to the bones. Like I think my personal sleep paralysis demon is that one picture of Bonaparte holding the head of Carnotaurus, because it's not just a skull, it's just the whole thing, and there's just one picture of it, and then they just prep through it to get to the skull, and it's like
I struggle to know if that's real.
It looks real.
It's hard to tell though from far away. Like it could be concretion over the surface.
It'd be so nice if we could look at it.
It would be. I choose to believe it wasn't there. Well, I mean,
I
like,
pretend I do not see.
well, no, the one that was always trotted out for a while on Paleo Twitter was like the proto at the AMNH. It was a Protoceratops where one side of it was like covered in a kind of punky, wrinkly. It's a hematite crust on it. It's still present on part of it. It's not
dirt.
skin. It's dirt.
I've
right.
seen it.
Yeah.
I know
no,
where
I remember
it
you
is.
when I went to look at it after we saw it on Twitter, and we were like, "Wait, we got to go see this."
It's just right there. It's like, no, that's dirt. And then, you know, you get. I think we did get into a bit of a discussion online where people are like, no, there's circles here. I'm like, no, they're not.
Yeah.
I'm looking at it. The bone is in front of me. The skull is in the room with me.
Right.
The skull
Photos are deceiving.
This is what allows me to be okay with thinking that I choose to believe that photo is not depicting what people want it to be.
Okay.
Or say it
the
is. But
Carnotaurus notwithstanding, this has happened so many times.
Oh, yes. And to be clear, it's bad when it happens.
Yes.
I just try to not think about Carnotaurus.
Yeah. So those are the worst things that I have personally seen.
Thank you. All right. Our next question comes to us from King Zashu, who asks, do you prefer your ornithopods with lips or cheeks? I prefer lips because it makes them look horrifying. And it certainly does make them look horrifying when they don't have cheeks. I prefer them with cheeks. To be very clear, of course, I don't mean muscular mammal-style cheeks. I just mean skin stretching between the upper and lower jaw forward to some degree. I prefer them with cheeks for two reasons. People have talked about this. You know, it's maybe not as big a problem as people make it out to be. I still think that chewing for them, it would be hard to chew if you didn't have some kind of mechanistic thing to keep the food in your mouth. And I know modern reptiles who eat like plants don't have to contend with that, but they also don't chew in the same way that ornithopods did. The other reason why I prefer them with cheeks is because of Panoplosaurus, which is the only fossil of any ornithischian that I can think of that has direct evidence for what is happening in that region of the face, soft tissue-wise, and that's because it has an osteoderm there. And because there's an osteoderm, there must be derm for there to osteo in. And so there is skin there in Panoplosaurus. It's not an ornithopod, but it's the only evidence we have of any ornithischian. And so the conservative approach, in my opinion, is to put skin there. It's mine.
I mean, Dalton, you're just right.
Yeah, I have nothing to add. That's just correct.
The only thing I could add is that the skin that we're talking about in birds is called a rictus, which maybe everybody would be okay with just agreeing on something if we just referred to it as a large rictus on an ornithopod.
Sure.
But
yeah,
that sounds bad. But
all I'll say is that there's a correct answer, but I won't tell you which one.
Alex has seen them. He is undying. So
our next question comes to us from Cayman, who asks, what's the crew's favorite Spec Evo game? And while we're at it, what's the crew's thoughts on Pikmin's biology? I'll go first again. I can't think of too many Spec Evo games that I've played or really that exist. Off the dome, my favorite would be Subnautica, because I think the creature design is really cool, and it's actually fun to play. Maybe also Avatar Frontiers of Pandora, if you would count that, because I also really enjoyed that game. I've never played a Pikmin game. I don't know anything about them. I think Olimar is an alien, but maybe Pikmin are from Earth. I don't really know.
I think so. I think it's supposed to be post-apocalyptic. I've also, tipping my hat, I've never played a Pikmin game either, sadly. But I will also echo Dalton's point there of Subnautica's so good. And it's up there for me. If we want to stretch the definition of Spec Evo, then maybe Monster Hunter. Especially like looking into like the research that they've done and like the concept art that they've done on the different monsters in Monster Hunter is phenomenal. But if I want to go like real hard Spec Evo and then therefore stretch the definition of game, I'll recommend to anybody South Scrimshaw. It's available on Steam, but it's basically just a visual novel. There's no real gameplay to speak of. It is free though, and it's a really interesting like Spec Evo project about this like alien ocean. Hey, a lot of the cool shit happens in oceans, of this group of like alien whales that have like essentially an adapted like hyper symbiosis with creatures, that like it's part of their growth cycle, that like once they reach a certain size and level of maturity, then they start incorporating, they almost become coral reefs. They start incorporating other biota into their own bodies. And like they have like a special layer of like fatty tissue and stuff that is explicitly designed for other animals to burrow into and become part of their bodies. It's really interesting. It's really weird. I'm doing a bad job describing it. The art's really cool. Again, it's free on Steam, and I'd recommend it. It's really neat. Like having some of the whales be like, oh, this one has bonded with a kelp forest, and as part of the symbiosis, they get some of the sugars from the photosynthesis. So here's a whale that is secondarily photosynthesizing. And it's neat. It's really, really cool.
That sounds really cool.
That is pretty cool.
It's rad. It takes like an hour to go through it or something like that. I highly recommend it. Again, free.
Huh. I've never heard of that.
Am I next?
It's
Amelia's actually written a response.
It doesn't matter. Yeah, I mean,
but
I have also not played Pikmin, other than I've played against the Pikmin man in Super Smash Bros.
Oh yeah,
that counts.
But I don't know. Does Pokemon count? Like, I don't play many video games. Like, that's the closest thing I can think of. I mean, on the one hand, it's not real, so it's speculative. On the other hand, they do evolve, so that's the closest. I don't think Skyrim counts, although I like some of the creatures. But it's inherently fantasy, so. And the other game of the 3 games that I've played in my life is Call of Duty, so. Sorry.
Not much evolution in Call of Duty.
I think Helldivers counts as
there's
speculative
de-evolution.
I don't like
Don't take my joke.
playing Helldivers, so it cannot be my favorite.
That's fair.
And oh man, there was another one that I thought of, and the other, I mean, Lego Jurassic World is the other game that I've played, and Paleopines, but neither of those are like speculative. So,
Alex, would you like to go, or may I?
I would. I mean, I don't really have. I'm gonna go. I've decided. I have also not played this Pikmin game. I'm sorry. I also don't know what really counts as Spec Evo, because like, is it anything that has like just like a cool roster of critters? Like, because Pokemon, like, I guess that's technically Spec Evo, but I also really never played a Pokemon game. In terms of thing I played, probably, to echo everyone, Subnautica, but the Ice World version, to be a little different.
That one.
Because the Shadow Leviathan's my favorite of the Leviathans. It's so cool.
It's a shame that it's the worst game.
It's all right.
It's less good than the base game, but
yeah, it's fine. There's a new one coming out. Don't worry.
I'm really sad that they didn't call it Sub-Zero.
Yeah, Below Zero is weird. New one coming out. I would say that Amelia is correct in that probably the Spec Evo game I play the most is Call of Duty Warzone, where humans have evolved the ability to actually be shot in the head once or twice and just kind of keep going.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool how I can put an entire magazine in a player and they somehow drop me. So that's pretty crazy. That's speculative evolution right there.
This sounds something like a speculative skill issue.
Yeah, I guess so.
there is briefly several players you can play as that you could argue are speculative humanoid evolution.
The humanoid.
True.
Such as the new dinosaur man that has the little embryo backpack, which is like really funny.
Yeah.
And I like a lot.
Is
I have
that
not
like,
seen one. It's got like a little, and it's like actually
It's
it does
like-
kind of look like a
is it
lizard
like
embryo.
Death Stranding?
It's
It
like
is kind
Death
of like Death
Stranding,
Stranding, yeah.
but a
That's
dino.
so-
It's Dino Stranding.
And I don't know why they did that choice.
It's
funny.
so weird.
But Death Stranding's like about mass extinctions, right? Maybe. What if it's connected? What if they're connected? Oh my
Maybe.
god.
They're connected through the
connected.
chiral network.
I did
So
not.
anyway, I've never played Pikmin, but I did have a friend in high school who was very active in the Pikmin speedrunning community.
Really?
Yes.
That's cool.
I don't know anything about
Of all
this.
the people,
What do you mean?
and of all the things,
Well, I mean, he's an interesting guy. I like. I don't know. I know nothing about Pikmin. I've never heard of this game beyond like him just saying, "Oh yeah, I speedran Pikmin 3 today" or whatever. In terms of Spec Evo, I don't know if you count it depending on like what you count, but Spore. I liked Spore a lot.
Yeah,
that's literally
I-
definitionally speculative evolution.
Right. I played a little bit of Spore during like peak pandemic times when I had a little bit of time because what else was I going to do? Go see Bones? Like I couldn't go see Bones. I do wish the game had more going on, but as a 12, 13-year-old playing it, I really liked it. And so I'm fond of it.
Yeah.
I'm curious. Were you able to get past the tribal stage? Not like difficulty-wise, but just like it was boring and frustrating.
I would speed run through tribal. It was actually city stage I hated the most because I found like
sucked.
well they really like dumbed down what city stage was supposed to be. Like my understanding is it was supposed to be a fairly in-depth RTS until you were able to conquer the world, and they made it so easy to do that you would be through the city stage in like a couple minutes.
Yeah.
Or maybe half an hour. It wasn't worth like you could do designs for all of the different types of building in your city and your different types of vehicles. And I was like, I do the lowest effort thing because nothing affects the stats. And then I can have a spaceship.
Yeah.
So
The space stuff was fun.
I liked Space Stage, yeah.
I just like making monsters.
That too.
All right, that's a good question. Thank you to Cayman. Because our next question comes from Dinodom. And that question is, what's everyone's favorite design from any Paleodoc? Dinotasia Eoraptor, Dinotasia Eoraptor, Walking with Dinosaurs, Leopleurodon, etc., and why? Also for Scott, since you were in South America at the time, quick opinions on Season 2 of Prehistoric Planet if the time is available. So, once again, I will start. This is a hard question because there's a lot of designs from documentaries that I like a lot. But just kind of going off of like, when people often ask like, oh, what's your favorite this? I tend to try and just pick what my gut immediately says. Because if you think about it too long, then you just kind of get wishy-washy. But it's either the Coelophysis in Walking with Dinosaurs. Because it just perfectly evokes that animal in like a really memorable way, in a really colorful way. It's great coloration, great personality, great sounds. It looks amazing as a puppet. It looks great in CG. It's just terrific. The only other thing that came to mind maybe is the black T-Rex with the white facial markings in Dinotasia. I think that's a really cool design as well.
It's so good. It's like the white markings are like its skull. It's so rad. I love it.
Well, they're a human skull in anterior view. The way they all line up, it looks like a human skull. That was
really?
Yes. There's one scene where it faces the camera and it just like it snaps in and it becomes a human skull.
That's so cool.
That's so cool.
That's rad.
It's really cool.
God damn it.
To keep it thematic, I think Amelia, you're next.
Oh yeah. So there's three that come to mind for me. Not to be, one of them is the Walking with Leopleurodon. I've always loved that. It's probably part of the reason I wound up working on wet animals. The others being also that T-Rex. I don't ever remember the name of that documentary, but I think about that design a lot because it's great. And the last one would be the Prehistoric Park Triceratops, which I don't feel like I need to explain.
That's one of the best designs
so
I've
good.
ever seen. Beautifully, beautifully done. I mean, okay, how annoying am I allowed to be with this? Is my question.
I think as annoying as you want to be with it.
Well, okay, so when you've named an animal that's in the documentary,
Oh my god.
it quickly becomes your favorite.
Not that
and you know
annoying.
what?
Never mind, I revoke.
It's not that annoying.
kidding.
Yeah, no, Alex was going to say it too. I had to beat him to it.
Well, Dalton took two places.
Listen, there are two kinds of people. There are kinds of people who have named dinosaurs in documentaries, and there are kinds of people who don't need to comment on whether or not they like them.
Okay, so
Anyway,
you chose to be the most annoying.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry to be the most annoying. I mean, I do love that design. although it is very similar to the Velociraptor. And so I think for that reason, I kind of wish it had a little bit of independence. Quite honestly, my favorite would probably be from Prehistoric Planet, the Chingosaurus. It is just... It is one of the few things I've ever seen in CG where every shot of it has me completely convinced it's a real animal. Like, I know it's CGI because I know it has to be CGI. I also really love the baby T-Rexes from that show. They're cute and they're so beautifully detailed. They're really cool.
What am I left with?
I mean, you can repeat if you want. There's no
no.
rules
yeah, I'm going to repeat it. No one repeats anything. I like the Hatzegopteryx in Prehistoric Planet Season 2 are really good.
Yeah.
Really, almost all the pterosaurs in that kind of go hard. Maybe a little unorthodox. I really like the Dimetrodons in Walking with Monsters.
Yeah, those are great.
Oh, they're very good.
That's just kind of what Dimetrodon looks like in my head now.
Yep.
I also... The Simosuchus is as close to perfect as one could get, also in Prehistoric Planet. I think that's probably... Oh, yeah, and the Lianosaura I always thought were charming in the Polar Forest episode of Walking with Dinosaurs, just as in terms of ones people haven't said before. Those always felt very real to me when I watched the part where they're all like bobbing around the edge of the river on like a log. They're a lot. Those are mine. Those are the ones that popped into my head when James said the ones I wanted to say. So I'm done.
And now, Scott, I think you've written an answer for the second part towards you, and I think people would also love to hear what your favorite design is.
Yes. I think I would say mine would be probably being very specific, the broken-jawed Allosaurus from like Dinotasia and what's the other name of that doc? Because it's like two different versions.
It's like Dinosaur Revolution.
Dinosaur Revolution. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's how I always knew
That's up there because it's a really good protagonist animal that is also pretty based in the science of just how absolutely beat to hell Allosaurus got and stuff. And like, I mean, we've all seen pictures of crocs and stuff where they have like no lower jaw, or like it's broken up at the symphysis and they're like two separate pieces, and it's like, how has this thing lived for like 60 years? How the hell? It's rad. So that animal just has so much personality to me. And also I have to say, on the Allosaurus train, Walking with Dinosaur Allosaurus, it's goofy as shit, and it's like the skull's terrible, but like that is the canonical coloration of what Allosaurus looked like to me. Mm-hmm. And then, Alex, you took my other big answer, which is the hats. The Hatzegopteryx is so goddamn good. It's so great. But those are probably my favorite up there. But in terms of my thoughts for season 2 of Prehistoric Planet, I liked it better than season 1. I thought that like season 1 had some really good bits in it. Like the Nenuxsaurus hunt, the Velociraptor hunt, stuff like that. Those were all well and good, but when I'm looking back on when I'm describing Prehistoric Planet to people, or when I'm thinking about it, I find myself thinking of all of the bits from season 2. Like everything on Madagascar, the Hatzegopteryx hunts, the Triceratops battle, the Rajasaurus hunt, all of that stuff, all of that season 2, all of that is just head and shoulders above everything else.
Agreed. All right, thank you all. That's another great question and a lot of great answers, if I do say so myself. Our next question comes to us from Kyo Doka, who asks, I recently commissioned an artwork by paleo artist Emily Stepp, and it led me down a rabbit hole relating to its extremely strangely written description of Sinobrachyops. And we have permission from Emily to show the image, so we can pop that up because Emily is great. So thank you, Emily, and thank you, Kyo Kyodoka, for sharing the image. I mentioned
thank you very much.
I mentioned it because the description of the animal's head is extremely odd, with it being labeled X 1/2, quotes. I've never seen something like this before, and I was wondering if you can enlighten me if I'm reading it right, because I can't tell the exact scale of the animal. Thanks for everything, guys. I love the videos and wanted to double check with paleontologists how accurate this first attempt at drawing the guy, at least to my and Emily's knowledge, is. I can't really speak to the accuracy of it because I don't study amphibians. I think it looks good. I think it looks really cool and great. I have no complaints to that. As to the question about the X 1/2, so this is a label that is more common in older works that you'll see. It's really never done now, but you'd see it in the past more. And what it really means is that if you actually had the printed article in hand in its original printed format, however big the page was, if you were holding it and you were reading it, the image that's on that page is 1/2 of life size. And sometimes it could be in reverse of like it's blown up 2 times life size. But it's just to give you a relative sense of how big it is. So it's not, there's no scale bar. It's just saying that this image is half as big as the real thing. I think it's actually a decent way of getting the reader to imagine the size of an object. Because you can decently imagine, like, oh, I'm looking at this thing and it'd be twice as big as this, and you can like use your hands and stuff. That's kind of cool, but it is just so dependent on having a physical copy of the work and actually having it in the original printed format. It's so dependent on how it's printed that it just doesn't work now, that people are reading things on a computer monitor or a phone or a tablet. You know, like we can read a paper now on any kind of device, and it's not necessarily faithfully recreating the intent with which it was like put down on the paper to be printed. So that's what that means, though. Is if you had the real thing, and by the real thing I mean the article, it would be half as much life size as Sinobrachyops.
And unfortunately, the bad news is it's not as simple as printed out on printer paper, because some of these old journals and books and things were printed in weird shapes and sizes. Yes. So like some of them, like just the book itself is like huge, and other ones they've got like big fold out things and stuff. Really cool to see in person, but very much like not generally accessible.
Yeah, thank you for elaborating on that too, because that is a very important point, that these things were printed in all kinds of weird aspect ratios. And
right, yeah, this is not right. There was no standardization,
No,
but it's common. I've seen so many, like, this is 1/5 natural size, and I think that stuff was actually pretty precise. A lot, like, you know, there was a lot of care taken in scientific illustration back then. To a degree, like there is something we've lost a little bit. I think, like, the old monographs are almost invariably, until like modern things with CT scan data, the most usefully illustrated papers that I have read. Like, I think the only exception to that I would say are like a lot of the AM&H monographs, but those are because like the exceptionally talented photographer Mick Ellison was doing the figures, and like he is just godlike in his ability to light and edit images to make sure that all the anatomical information is being shown. And so it's that combined with the fact that AM&H journals had infinite figure space. So like you could take every shot you really needed. But those papers aside, like these old woodcut things, like people were incredibly precise. They were exacting. And I think there's a lot of artistry at work in those old papers. But that said, like, they certainly never anticipated you might zoom in on the image.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Does anyone else have any thoughts on the Sinobrachyops reconstruction?
I know nothing about Sinobrachyops, but
it's a brachiopod, right? So, like, I guess compare it to. Do we have the image?
It's in the
Discord.
Discord, yeah.
Okay, hold on.
It's cool.
It's very cool. I like the eggs and like the larva. Yeah, in the March Q&A. Yeah, Emily illustrated it with eggs and larval and like sex differences. It's really cool.
Where the heck?
No, yeah, it's gorgeous.
Pardon me. I'm just.
I also wish I knew more about this animal, but this is stunning.
Am I stupid?
Yeah.
In this case, looking back at the paper, because I've found it now, it does look like this journal was kind of like probably printed on like 8.5 by 11 like regular size paper. So you could, in this instance, probably print it out and get a sense of kind of the size. But that's just because this is a more. It's from 1985, so it's more modern than like these things from the 1800s.
That's later than I've generally seen that kind of approach. I'm actually surprised it's that recent.
Me too.
Well, it's a turtle, isn't it?
It's a salamander.
Oh, okay, never mind. I was going to make a stupid joke about how, turtles are slow, so maybe they're just a little behind on notation. Salamanders are pretty slow, though, too.
They ain't speedy.
Wait. Sinobrachyops is a salamander?
Yeah.
Sinobrachyops.
I don't know why.
Well, it's a brachiobid. It's not a salamander, but it looks like a salamander.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Like it's temnospondyl. Okay.
Yeah, I was colloquially.
Gotcha.
Speaking.
I mean, I'm looking at it's nice art, and it's got the gilled juvenile, which we know at least some temnospondyls had.
Mm-hmm.
The eggs. Yeah, I mean that looks like. I'd buy it. I'd buy that for $1.
Yeah. All right. Cool.
Yeah, I like it. I think it looks neat, but I also don't know a lot about temnospondyls.
So I think we've covered the basis for that question, and thank you for the question, Kyodoka. Our next one comes to us from Mayday, who asks, "What are you most jealous of from Pleistocene paleontologists for having that dinosaur paleontologists will never have?" My answer is simple: literal corpses in permafrost.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I go on, Amelia.
I would just say that in sample size.
I was gonna say something about just like cave paintings, like giving us some insight into like relationships between these animals and like how they would have looked and stuff like that. And I'm just like, no, it's just the entire whole animal, just like with literally every part of it just preserved in permafrost. It's like correct. That's it.
All right. So, people have mentioned a lot of the big things. There being soft tissue. There being cool cave painting. There being sample size. I think, has anyone said like DNA and like protein and molecular?
That's another thing. Yeah.
Okay. So there's that one, but also I would say, and this is a little, I don't want to say silly, but the actual real possibility to kind of make one of these in real life, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's what I'll say, because I think other people might talk about the DNA.
Well, I wasn't actually going to talk about that, but
okay. Then I'll quickly say also molecular evidence to figure out like what these things are actually related to. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, and not only that, I mean the population genetic stuff you can do, like Bayesian skyline plots to look at population sizes over time. Like you can do that from DNA. We know when bison populations crashed in North America. It's interesting that it seems to be when humans entered the continent for the first time. But the range of science you can do with DNA extends so far beyond the systematics too, which is very cool. But for me, I mean, obviously all the things people have talked about, but I think what I like the most is that like you can really contextualize these things. Like these are animals that in many cases are very, very much like what we have on Earth today. You've got extinct tapirs, cats, dogs, bears, right? And I think it paints a picture of a world that is so much more diverse, and to some degree makes me sad because it illustrates how depauperate our ecosystems were even before civilizational expansion and destruction of habitats.
Mm-hmm.
But I think is also a very kind of beautiful thing to know that there was just so much life, even while there were glaciers covering most of the land masses of the Northern Hemisphere. Like there is just such a beautiful diversity of these animals. And that what we see is just the small fraction of what can exist. Like, I think that's really interesting. You know, a dinosaur is really cool, and I like working on them. But like, to have just an extinct bear or an elephant or a camel, and just know like this is part of this whole smear of these amazingly diverse lineages that were inhabiting this area at this time. There's something very remarkable about that.
Yeah.
Especially when it's something in an area you don't expect it to be in. Like at the Dueling Dinosaurs opening events at the North Carolina Museum, North Carolina's got a decent number of like Pleistocene fossils. And we had out this beautifully preserved jaw of a juvenile tapir. It's an extinct species, but in the Pleistocene, like they just used to live in North Carolina, and like that's a thing. Like that's just a tapir. You know what I mean? Dinosaurs often to me feel a little bit too much like fantasy creatures, where like there's so much we don't know that we might as well make up stuff about them. But you know, it's hard to imagine what these animals were like when they were alive. And I think it's a really cool thing that you can do with Pleistocene fossils is you really can know in a way that you can't with other things.
That's all
said.
good answers. Again, very well said. Although that, James, honestly just makes me mad. Like there's an anger that like progresses closer and closer to time of like, how dare I miss out on being able to see this really cool thing, which like for most, like for Pleistocene stuff, it's just like a low, like I'm not really that angry because I'm like, it is 10 plus thousand years ago. Like, yeah, I missed it. Oh well, who cares? I'm still upset about it. I'd love to have seen one. But then it just, the anger gets more and greater the closer in proximity the extinction is to like the Thylacine, just the thought of it.
Oh my God. It pissed me off so much.
The stupid action of a bunch of hick Europeans denied me my right to see one of these f***ing amazing animals, like makes me so mad. I'm just like, how dare you spoil this planet for me that I can't experience something you did, you piece of
Moa's Stiller's sea cow.
So mad.
Honestly,
dodos, Carolina parakeets,
passenger pigeons for
the
me.
passenger pigeons that would blot out the sun. Like
any of the rare shorebirds that like European sailors would literally just grind into paste because it was slightly more energy efficient.
The great auks. Like
Amelia, what were you going to say?
I was also going to say dodos.
Yeah.
Because they're just so odd.
Yeah.
And I mean, what gets me is like they were just a part of everything. I've talked about this a couple of times recently in like various contexts. Like we know that I think it's white oaks. Amelia, you know things about trees, and so maybe I'm wrong about this. Correct me if I am. White oaks, to my understanding, germinate at a different time than other oak species.
That I don't know.
I might be getting the species wrong. I don't know how to find the paper right now. But basically,
there's a couple of oaks. So
right, but there's at least one oak that's been apparently for a long time was noticed to just have a weird like reproductive cycle relative to other species. Like it was just kind of off cycle. As it turns out, this is the only oak species that produces acorns that are the right size to pass through the digestive tract of a passenger pigeon. And they have tracked when they germinate, and it is precisely to avoid the historical cycle of migrations of the passenger pigeons through these areas. So we have a species that is still alive, that has a life history adaptation to avoid predation by an extinct species.
That's pretty cool.
And that is, I think, just such an astounding thing to be able to recognize. It was a really interesting paper. I don't know. It hits in a very fundamental way.
Like, James, I know you've brought up before the like one of those illustrations where it just shows like the historical like mammal diversity of North America, and then everything that's still alive today is in color, everything else is in grayscale, and it's just a couple specks. It's just
no, I mean, there's that illustration I'm thinking of right now that I'm going to send in chat. That is incredible. I think it's what you're thinking of, but yes.
Yeah,
Sorry.
it's just not a couple specks. It's just like there's like a handful of animals that are in color, and then all of these absolutely amazing, beautiful creatures that are just like they're gone. They're ghosts. They're just bye.
Right.
It is the fate of all things.
It is.
However, I'd appreciate if the fate of all things would wait a little while.
Yes.
I'd like to
Um,
see. Please stop.
I've sent the image Scott's talking about in our messenger chat. It is one of the most beautiful pieces of scientific communication paleo art I have ever seen.
Yes,
It hurts me.
It's a beautiful, beautiful representation of it.
God, it hurts me.
And like the ones that are like, you know, more or less went extinct like long ago, I'm like, that sucks. It's sad. I hate it. But the ones that were like in a zoo and people just didn't have the foresight to have any care for the natural world at all. Our next question, a happier question, comes to us from Rad Reptile 615, also a rad name. Could Lex and Tim have defeated the Velociraptors in the kitchen by simply turning on the stove and leaving a non-stick frying pan on the burner? So this is very funny.
I remember when this question was asked, and it caused quite a ruckus in the Discord.
Yeah. So this comes from the fact that non-stick cookware, it's a known fact that it's dangerous for pet birds because if you get it too hot, the chemicals that they coat them with to be non-stick aerosolize and are toxic to birds. So the question is, would they be toxic to the velociraptors in Jurassic Park? And so here's what my cursory research found when I was looking into this. And so please, and if anyone has anything else to enlighten, bump in, cut in, and interrupt me if you need to. But from what I could find is that birds are particularly susceptible to PTFE toxicity because of several factors, mostly their respiratory efficiency and high metabolic rate combined with their small size. This all makes sense to me. This all is sensical as to why they'd be susceptible to these airborne toxins. Now, going down that line of reasoning, the raptors would have the same respiratory efficiency, more or less, and they'd have a high metabolic rate. So those are two things not in their favor for surviving the non-stick pan invasion. But the thing that's not in their favor, or the thing that is in their favor, is their size. Now, I'm going to assume an animal the same size as the Jurassic Park raptors for this question, not like a real velociraptor. But an animal that big, because size is such a huge factor when it comes to like toxicity of things and how much of a given toxin you can withstand, I bet it would outweigh the other influences. And I don't think it'd be good for them to be around the non-stick cookware, but I don't think it would like kill them in the same way that it's going to kill like a parakeet or a budgie or something.
Which also, I think it bears mentioning that like this is very acutely toxic to birds. That like I've heard stories of like people cooking with nonstick cookware and coming in the next room and their bird's dead.
Oh wow!
Now, this isn't just something like, oh, it takes a while.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's like it's a buildup and they had some bad stuff happen. It's like it can be fast.
Has anyone tried to cook in a room with like a cassowary or an ostrich? Because then we'd have our answer.
They're right.
Well, Amelia, you might have your next SVP talk there.
This is Amelia. This is your NSF postdoc proposal.
This is my career-ending nature
kill a
paper.
cassowary with a frying pan, but not how you
Well,
think.
they farm them. They farm emu, right?
Yeah.
Like
they do, and ostrich.
Do you think that when they're ready for the meat, they kill them by?
Do you think
Bringing them
the
into
burner
the
on?
kitchen?
the real question is, would I cook approve this?
No,
Probably not.
I want to just briefly chime in and while I agree with Dalton broadly,
mm-hmm.
I don't think a raptor would have had a truly avian metabolic rate.
No, yeah.
But, I mean, they'd be warm-blooded, but like I once accidentally left my nonstick pan on the burner in my apartment for several hours while I coded a matrix, and then was like, I smell something burning. And I didn't die, even though I'm an endotherm.
Yeah.
Yes, you did.
Birds have insane metabolic
We're
rates.
here.
Yeah. Right. We're here now. Birds have a really, really high metabolic rate. I think the size may honestly be more of it than that. But like based on the growth records we have for Dromaeosaurs, they're not growing slowly, but they're not like birds fully mature in like a year, maybe two. Right.
Yeah.
And like it's a very kind of different thing. So I don't think this would have been acutely toxic to even a very small Dromaeosaur, although maybe like prolonged exposure would be very bad for them. I'm not sure.
Yeah. I think like the total surface area of like just all the tissue that that poison air could interact with in like a really small bird. I think, yeah, I don't think that's going to be, especially in like dromaeosaurs, the size of the ones in the movie. I think our charming young heroes might have perished, and then maybe if the dromaeosaurs would like stayed in there for like a week afterwards after eating them, to be like, oh no, I've perished as well. Cool question, though.
So I had a quick answer to this, which is to do a little tangent on that. I do think that Lex and Tim could have defeated the raptors if they just threw a blanket over the raptors, because, now it's nighttime and they have to go to sleep, just like regular birds.
That's probably true.
Well, there's a great comic.
Right. It's nighttime and I have to wake up.
Yes. There's a great comic that I think of every once in a while that it's like shows someone like draping a cloth over a parakeet's cage that's like screaming and singing, and then it just immediately goes to sleep. And then it's Jurassic Park and the T-Rex is chasing the Jeep, and the rag top rips off of it and hits over its face, and it just stands up and just goes. It's great.
It's so cool because we used to in high school. I would babysit the parrot of the robotics team. Like the teachers who were in charge of the robotics team had this really cute miniature macaw. It's like a Hans macaw. There's this beautiful green bird, and it was like this big, and it could talk, and it was mean to a lot of people, but it was nice to me. And so because it was nice to me, they're like when they needed to leave town, they're like, "Can you watch it at your house?" And we're like, "Sure." And her name was Chunk. And you would go to put the
great name.
And they named her that because she'd tear chunks out of you. She bit you. But you'd go to put the blanket over Chunk's cage, and even just like starting to grab the blanket, she just started going, "Good night, good night." And it was like, it's so cute. It's such a cool thing that happens.
That's so cool.
I love the level of intelligence in birds and stuff. Like all the stories I've heard of like birds being just so creative with their vocalizations are just great.
It's great. Now, so that was a very fun question. Thank you. Our next question is from Paleo AK92, who asks, this is a follow-up question I asked in a previous Q&A, the machine learning engineer guy. I'd like to develop tools for you to use for your statistical and mathematical needs. The language and tools you use are no issue for me. Would that be something you're interested in? And if so, how would you like to discuss things further? And I think, James, you have the most immediate response to this. So,
yeah, there's a lot of challenges we face. And I mean, right now, honestly, I think the biggest thing that we kind of deal with is just dealing with missing data. And I think developing some sort of imputation method that can either fully explore a trait space with like some relative degree of efficiency would be very valuable for several things that are being worked on. And so DM us, we can chat a little bit more about like what kinds of tools need to be developed and what that might look like. But yeah, we'll talk more then.
Yeah, thanks for reaching out.
New statistical methods are always helpful. Mm-hmm. And it's really, there's a lot of things that I think we kind of know what needs to be done, but I think a lot of people in our community don't exactly know the exact mechanics of how to implement them.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for reaching out with that question. Our next one comes to us from JP Lover 16, who asks, what's the most interesting thing you found in the back of a museum collection that you can actually talk about? For me, mine is...
Thanks for specifying that.
For me, mine's definitely the coelacanth in the Yale collections. We've got one fluid, and it's just in the big tank. And you can open up the lid, and you're like, holy, there's a coelacanth in there. That's amazing.
Ooh, we have one of those on display at Harvard. It's great.
Ooh.
It's got a bunch of little chunks and flaky bits at the bottom of the thing. It's kind of gross.
Disgusting. Thank you.
It's great. Speaking of things that are disgusting, mine would definitely be the plasticized circulatory system and skeleton of the upper body of a monkey that we have in our collection.
That's cool.
It's one of the wildest it's in our teaching collection, and it's like one of the first projects I had when I was at Harvard was going through the teaching collection and seeing what needed repairs. And I've never seen a preparation like that before of a specimen where it's in a little shadow box and it's pinned up and it has the back half of the skull taken off as well, so you can see all the capillaries and stuff going around the brain and everything. It is haunting. It's wild. And it's also weird that all of the blood vessels are green on this one for some reason. It must have been the method that they used. And the method they used probably also kind of destroyed the skeleton because it is falling apart. That thing is very fragile.
Wow.
I think I showed it to both James and Amelia when they visited.
You've never shown me this.
I didn't show it to you? I think I showed it to James.
You did. It was cool.
Yeah.
I do want to see
I want
this
to make more of them.
Don't do that.
I am going to turn every animal I can get my hands on into a disembodied mass of blood vessels.
They call him the monkey vesseler. Don't know if I liked that.
I don't like that either. Anyway.
It was on display, so it doesn't count, but at the Museum of Comparative Anatomy in Paris, there's one of those, but it's an orangutan, and it looks like it's in agony. Oh, no. It's like, I'll send it to you guys in the chat, because it's very funny. I think it's intentional that the only photographs you ever see of that museum are like kind of the broad overshots of all the bones everywhere, because there are some interesting old artifacts in that museum that are scientifically valuable, I would say, but perhaps questionable in other regards. The orangutan being one of them, even though it's very funny. But that doesn't count in terms of because that's not collections. I don't know. I'm going to actually not say what I said in our planning document, just because it's very cute and the database is public, so you could theoretically find it. The Sternberg Museum has like these little baby Zephactinus that are like the cutest things I've ever seen.
That sounds awesome.
Like a tiny little dennery. I'm like, oh my god, it's so tiny. So those. They're really cute.
I'm dying to not say what I want to say. But I can't say it.
Yep.
Okay.
Alex, you go ahead. I got to think for longer. I'm sorry.
I don't know. Some cool turtles. Everything I want to say is things that I find and go, ooh, I have to add this to a manuscript. At least in the last month.
There's been a lot of it.
Amelia, what the
Marasaurus skull at the Carnegie was what?
Immediately after the really poignant paleo art piece is this.
It's on public display, so I don't mind if you put this up in the video. It's something. It's really the eyes, I think. That
it's a horrible thing.
There's
me when I touch wet food doing dishes.
I'm remembering too that like the actual like plastinated stuff, like I think they were goats or llamas or some kind of ungulate that were like plastinated but like disemboweled. Like it's really it is. I want to be clear. This museum, it's one of the most incredible museums I've ever been to, but it's a lot. And there's a lot of things like this that it's like, oh, this is not a museum. Like, this is sidetracking a lot, but it's like a lot of, I've complained perhaps publicly about how a lot of museums nowadays are moving more towards like visitor experience style, tech heavy, like content light styles. And there's some institutions that just don't care about this trend at all. And the Museum of Comparative Anatomy in Paris is one of them. Like, oh my god, it feels like you stepped back into the 1700s in the way that things are displayed and like the little labels and just like how off-putting everything is. But it's phenomenal. highly recommend if you are not sensitive to anatomy in general.
And if you're sensitive to anatomy, how are you watching our video?
Yeah.
Well, we don't show the plastinated disemboweled llamas.
I kind of want to see that though.
It's so cool.
Yeah.
Or
Alex, you didn't finish.
Oh, yeah. All the stuff is stuff that either I want to work on or other people have been like, that's pretty cool, right? I'm working on that. So I don't really have a good answer. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
There are a number of amazing fossils I've seen. I've seen things you people wouldn't believe.
Just gonna leave it at that.
I guess the Sornitholestes is probably the cool.
The Sornitholestes at the University of Alberta might be the coolest thing. But in terms of like something almost inexplicable, not a lot. I mean, honestly, in terms of like just like, that collection of rattlesnake vertebrae from like a cave in the Caribbean. That's like, to me, it's just like, what the
the forbidden popcorn.
The forbidden popcorn. It's a giant box just full of thousands upon thousands of rattlesnake vertebrae. It's really cool.
It's really gross.
That is cool. We've got some snakes in boxes that are like, the box looks like popcorn, but like someone had the foresight to string them up on a string. So it's kind of like when you hang popcorn up for Christmas, but it's just a snake.
There's a plant store near me that has garland up that I thought it was just some sort of decorative thing, and then I looked closer and it was like snake vertebrae on a string, and it looks really cool.
Yeah. All right. Well, that was another fun one. Our next question comes from Dino Nerd 1, who asks, "What's your favorite species of amphibian? Extant, extinct, or both?" And I'm going to choose both because it's fun to think about that. My favorite extant amphibian is probably the desert rain frog because it is just a small, living, angry orb. And my favorite prehistoric amphibians, it'd be hard to choose for me between Prionosuchus and Platyhystrix. Platyhystrix because it's got a cool fin, Prionosuchus because big, and I'm a well-known proponent of I like big things.
It's me next.
Yep.
Yes. Living would either be red-eyed tree frogs or hellbenders. I love them both. They're very great. And I know I've said Prionosuchus before, but I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Mastodonsaurus. I love its like doofy little tail. I love its giant teeth that stick out the top of its head. It's so goofy. I also do have a love for Eriops, and Eriops doesn't get enough love.
I think getting to be the logo of SVP is enough love.
It is, yes. Even if it is almost certainly a very hateful creature.
For me...
Or Amelia?
Oh, no. I actually wrote things down. For living stuff, I like a lot of living amphibians. I'm partial to... I like newts of all kinds. They just have like a cuteness about them that I quite enjoy. And I am also very partial to firebelly toads, which I have had as pets for like over 14, if not 15 years now. And they join me in recording every night, and they just stare at me through the glass because they're like right there. For extinct, I've said probably 1,000 times because there's always good questions for these Q&As to say so, but Diplocaulus, phenomenal little animal.
I prefer clades that can't be driven to extinction by a single fungus.
Fungus is
productive.
even
Thank
worse
you.
than plants.
I'm sorry.
Like, I don't... In terms of, like, horror, you think plants are bad? Like,
no, they're bad. I'm just saying it's one fungus. It's not one species of amphibian. It's amphibians as a concept. I'm not a huge amphibian fan. I do like hellbenders though.
Great name.
Like
too.
I think I like Dalton. I like big, and I like big to a degree that feels wrong or immoral. There's something that hits different about seeing an animal that's just just a little bit uncomfortably too large for the kind of animal it is. It's how I feel about moose relative to other deer.
Yeah, fair.
And it's how I feel about like hellbenders and giant salamanders. It's like, what the that's hey,
Slow
that's
too big.
too big. Right.
Especially
That's
giant
impolite.
salamanders.
Giant salamanders.
So cool.
They've got little man hands.
That's how I feel like learning how big some of these like ocean fish we catch for food are. Like when I see the size of a tuna. I'm like, that's a fish are this big. Don't you put this 16-foot long, multiple ton fish in front of me? No. Cod.
Are cod
Like
big?
learning how large Atlantic
Cod are
cat
pretty
and cod
big.
and halibut are.
Atlantic
Right.
cod get huge.
Okay, I definitely thought cod were this big.
And,
No, they
God,
get
big boys.
big.
halibut. Halibut are huge.
Yeah, halibut.
Oh, 600-700 pounds plus.
Yeah.
I think big fish are great, but
I do too. I just didn't know cod were big.
Yeah,
That's so
individuals
cool.
in excess of 71 inches long and 50 kilograms have been caught.
cod
Of cod.
I'm looking at these
on
big boys.
cod.
On cod.
On cod, respectfully.
On
These are
cod.
great.
One nation.
That's a nice
Under
fish.
cod.
All right. Should I say mine?
Yeah.
Yes.
Should I do the thing?
You should.
Extant. There are a lot of good amphibians. James Napoli, noted man who doesn't understand music, also doesn't understand the music of nature, the amphibian.
I like the spring peeper.
Giant salamanders, cool, because big cool. But what I haven't heard a lot of love for, which I think are the wackiest little things, the aquatic Sicilians,
Yeah, they're great.
scaly little tube-faced weirdo. I also really like the sirenids, the weird, long, horrible salamanders,
Sirenians, yeah.
which also get very big.
Amphiuma are the ones that get huge, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
In terms of extinct, I don't like what are we considering an amphibian?
I think
does
even
it have to be
Tempest
like a batrachomorph, or does it just
I think
In the casual sense.
I think non-amniote tetrapod.
non-amniote? Oh, okay. Crassigyrinus.
I do like that guy too.
If we can go like down tree, yes, that weird long eel looking moth.
Yeah, he's cool.
Yeah, and everyone else has said Diplocaulus, great.
It's perfect. Yeah.
Trionosuchus, great. Yeah, I mean, like, I love Coolosuchus. I know it just looks like all the other members of its group, but like, I don't know, the idea of being, one of the last temnospondyls hanging out in the land down under. It's a very cool. It's like a little glimpse.
Yeah.
You didn't think you'd get it. It's pretty neat.
Yeah. I must say, I also do have a fondness just for one frog's genus name. Like coqui frogs, which you hear about a lot in behavioral ecology. I just like that their scientific name is Eleutherodactylus coqui. Like that's got such good mouthfeel.
Yeah.
It's got rhythm to it. I like that a lot.
Cookie?
It's a shame that the fungus will claim them.
It is.
Also, Dalton, I want to actually you for a quick second there. Sirens are in Sirenidae. Sirenia are sea cows.
Oh, you're right. Yes. Oops.
My favorite frog is the manatee.
I mixed up my mermaids. But yes, thank you for that.
No problem.
No, I will also. I'm going to shout out. I didn't even think about it, but I am going to shout out a favorite amphibian of mine is the spring peeper, just because I really like moving out here and hearing them in the spring. I love the sound they make. It's so great. It just really makes me happy hearing the spring peepers peeping.
Do you hear them now?
Not tonight, but I like last month they were really out in force, and actually last week it got kind of rainy, and then they were peeping. We're almost done, folks. We have one more question.
Oh my god!
And it comes to us from the man with no name, who asks, "What's a practice in the field or in the literature that you think is very good but is relatively uncommon and you'd like to see more of?" And I didn't have the foresight to pre-answer this one, so I'm going to have to think hard, and I might have to pass. But Amelia, you have written something.
I've written 2 answers. In keeping with the theme of there's my gut reaction, which is a joke that we can't say. And the real answer, which is I really wish more people would figure things more thoroughly. This is a recurring theme tonight. We were talking about this in Atrociraptor, weren't we?
Yeah.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
as a student working at an institution that did not have a large collection of fossils relevant to what I wanted to work on, with an advisor who didn't work on, you know, the same animals that I wanted to work on, we collectively, my advisor and I, had a hard time finding resources to learn about mosasaurs, just because they're not as well figured, or like certain aspects of them are better figured than others. One of the regions like that has been the bane of my existence this week is the palate, the roof of the mouth of these things. Specifically anything, because everyone focuses on the pterygoids because they're the cool bone, which is fine and fair, because like it's, in my opinion, it's very aesthetic. It's nice and curvy. It's got like these big teeth. It's really cool. But there's a bunch of other stuff going on. And I think part of the reason is that in a lot of these specimens, like that part of the anatomy is like flattened or pancaked or smeared or shards or whatever in the Kansas material. But there are so many nice European fossils that have those bones, and they're 3-dimensional and they're nice, or they're exposed, like the one that's on display in Brussels. That's like one of the most beautiful skulls in existence of a mosasaur. But anyway, the point of this is like it's really difficult for people just starting out, and even not, just to try and figure out what exactly you're looking at if you don't have a visual reference for what this bone should look like. Because with fossils, you're dealing with so many other factors that make it 1,000 times more difficult to be sure of what you're looking at. One is that you don't ever really know what species you're working on because we don't have DNA. The other is like sometimes the bones are squished because that's what happens in 75 million years of being in the ground. But without an image of what the bone should look like unsquished, it's really hard to kind of work backwards and be like, okay, should that hole be there? Should it not be there? And then when it comes time to write these things up, it can be difficult without like a reference to know that what you're describing is, you're calling it by the right name, you have it in the right spot, or, you know, all of that kind of stuff. So I really wish more descriptions would figure things. And this is, I focused on the palate, but the other region that's really under figured, at least for my animals, is postcrania. Like, please take a picture of the axis. Like, I don't know why the axis is like never figured. And there's, as I'm learning, like a lot going on there. That's really cool and informative for figuring out how these things are related, figuring out some other interesting aspects of their evolution. And the limbs, like it's like pulling teeth to find a nice illustrated humerus or femur that is also labeled, you know, in the literature sometimes. Which again, there are certain aspects of publishing and working on these things that cause this. Like, again, the Kansas material, it's often pancaked, so it's hard to see the palette. Journals sometimes have, or a lot of times have, page limits, so it's hard to figure everything. But it's frustrating. Mm-hmm. It's still frustrating. And I think nowadays with more like digital repository type things where you can have like supplemental info, like I think we're running out of excuses to not just like share your photograph, share your data, so that, you know, other researchers and students trying to learn these things can actually understand what you're describing and have an easier time transitioning into their own career.
While I echo Amelia's points, I won't rehash them, because Amelia's specific examples are obviously about mosasaurs, but like the same broader concern exists pretty much everywhere. I'm working on tyrannosaurs right now. It is very rare to see published descriptions of tyrannosaur postcrania. And there's a lot to talk about there. Most of the bones are behind the head, and yet most of the description is the head. Here's my little axe to grind. I feel like we've entered an era where people don't create new phylogenetic data sets. There seems to have been something that happened in the field where in like the mid 2010s, everybody just started doing analyses where every paper is just like, okay, we put this into this person's published matrix and we're doing the phylogenetics. We're not adding new character observations. We're not revising old homology statements or anything. And I think we need to continue doing that. And I think it's very informative. I mean, I certainly, when I was doing projects for my PhD and I was just scoring new fossils in matrices, I did not feel that I understood the anatomy of the group to the degree that I now feel, having, worked on an extremely revised matrix for a group that I'm working on, where I've really had to scrutinize every character. I've added many characters, I've discarded characters, but it means you really need to engage with the material on such a deep level that you understand it very well by that point. I think it's a shame that we've kind of entered an era where it seems like, I don't know, it seems like the wisdom is like for a student, it's not worth your time to try to build a new matrix, try to do these things with a published data set, which is always tempting. But I think the process of adding to something really matters.
Mm-hmm.
And revising all of that. So more primary work like that. It should not be that characters don't get added to matrices that are used for 10 years when there's an explosion of new fossils and new character statements. Personally, that's my little axe that I grind. I
have not come up with my own answer because I think both Amelia especially, and then also James to an extent, is my answer. Like I agree. That's what I think the field needs, and it's so pointed that I agree that it matches up that 2 chapters of my dissertation are involving examining the postcranial skeleton and looking for phylogenetic characters within that. So. That's what I would think.
Yeah, I mean these are all bueno answers, except the postcrania is in fact unimportant. Actually, almost all of the skull is unimportant.
There's only like 10 important.
There are only 4 bones that matter, folks. They're the palatine, vomer, pterygoid, and ectopterygoid, and maybe sometimes the maxilla. No, I would say, I don't want to say like, saying like long form anatomical descriptions is, I feel like, a cop out, but people should do those. Please do those. Christ, please do those. Because there's a lot of overlap just in terms of people figuring things. Perhaps, I mean, honestly, if you're at an institution that can, please CT scan your fossils.
Oh yeah.
Or surface scan them and then distribute them on the internets if so allowed. That's my, like, I feel like, and it's improved like undeniably, especially in like the last 4 years. Like there's now people are CT scanning stuff constantly, but like it should all be digitized at this point.
And if I might add a clarifying point that I think is important, is if you're allowed to by your institution, and I think more institutions should allow this, share the raw CT data, please.
Yes. Yeah.
Not just the segment. Like the segmentations are valuable, but the raw data is invaluable.
And also, please, if you're doing that, please include the XYZ voxel information.
Yeah.
Don't make me do math. Don't make me like have to find a scale bar image of your thing and then like divide by the number of TIFF images in a stack. Don't make, please. It's so easy. Put a little info, a README file.
Oh God, that just reminds me. We have on our CT reconstruction software for our like in department or like in MCZ scanner. It has what I like to call the button that you click if you just really feel like you want to redo the reconstruction step, which is the add scale bars button, which it does to every single individual slice. So it adds giant 100% opaque scale bars through the entirety of the whole thing that you cannot get rid of, and it's just I want to redo this button. It's a nightmare, and I hate it so much.
That's a useful function.
I've had so many times where people are just like, Scott, it's a box. What are you talking about? I was like, oh, I know what you did.
That's pretty wacky.
Well, Scott, do you want to say any of your answer, or are we aligning that for time?
No, we're aligning that for time.
So concludes our question and answers.
Indeed,
it does. These were fun.
We answered.
These are fun questions, everybody. I wish I could say I don't know what questions will come next month, but I do, because they were asked in April and it's May, and we're catching up.
You better believe it.
We're doing our
But
best.
you know what's even better than questions and answers?
Thanking
The fine folks who support this endeavor.
Yes. I was trying to do a what do you call it?
a vamp.
Behind the bastard style pivot. We have patrons, and I
we
thank
do.
them very much. Benjamin Seepser, nickname, original username, and Philip Fico support us at Triceratops tier. Thank you very much. AK92 and Christopher Bellis Jones support us at Tylosaurus tier. Thank you very much. Aaron Anderson, Adamolos, Camphibia, Dan O'Kyrus, Dinodom, King Zashu, Max Ironpaw, Pythonic, Swamp Ape Science, Wanderer, and Wheat support us at Gorgosaurus tier. Thank you very much. All of our other patrons in Basilosaurus, Jungarsukis, and Ectetosaurus tiers will have their names in the credits of this video. Thank you so much to all of our patrons for sending in such great questions for us to answer, and for all of your support for the Skeleton Crew and everything we do. We really appreciate it. Now, I'm going to get this sleepy boy off to bed if I can avoid accidentally talking to Alex for an hour and a half in my living room. I don't know if I'll make it. I'm now old, so I talk through burps like the John Mulaney routine. Good night.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye.